So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our speakers. So Melissa Vesser is the clinical director for the Early Autism Services in the St. Louis region. She is a board certified behavior analyst or BCBA, and has a master's degree in human environmental studies with specializations in applied behavior analysis with autism spectrum disorders. Melissa is a dedicated professional in the field of applied behavior analysis, having worked in clinical, classroom, and home settings over the last 10 plus years. Melissa is very passionate about serving individuals on the autism spectrum and is thrilled to be a member of the St. Louis team, as we all are to have her in St. Louis. So also we have speaking with Melissa today is Jessica Goldberg, and she is the outreach specialist with Early Autism Services and a special needs parent. She is also deeply rooted in the autism community, both professionally and personally. She has been working in the field of special needs advocacy and community relations since 2001. As the mother of two teenagers who both have special needs, Jessica brings firsthand knowledge of the importance of early and intensive intervention, as well as the challenges navigating these essential resources that are present in this world. As we all know, this access to these services, especially in the rural communities, is so huge in our world. So in her current role with Early Autism Services, she serves as the liaison between a team of exceptional clinicians and the autism community, connecting families and providers with therapeutic resources. And that's how I met Jess, because I was trying to connect a family in the early autism world. And she was so amazing and instrumental in getting not only that family, but many other families since then connected to this community of providers. So without further ado, I will hand it over to both Melissa and Jessica. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Wow. Between the resilience and mindfulness in that introduction, I wish I could start every day this way with you all. Thank you so much. We're going to keep things super informal. I hope we can take a little time to explore resources for navigating essential resources for children with autism. But before we get into our presentation, just wanted to share a little bit more about our company. Early Autism Services provides ABA, so applied behavior analysis, therapy, and parent training to children on the autism spectrum. We're in 19 locations across the US, India, and Australia, with over 15 years of experience in clinical services. We have over 800 clinicians helping families, like I said, around our country and the world. So we're super proud of that. Our services are provided in-home, in the community, and our therapy centers and via telehealth. So when I say in the community, wherever a child spends time. So maybe a preschool center, after school program, or sometimes that child and his or her parents need some support at Target or getting haircuts. So wherever that family is where we can come in and provide support. We do consider ourselves early intervention specialists. So our goal is to connect with children as early as possible to really make maximum impact on growth and development. We work with children right at diagnostic age, so right around 18 months to approximately 12 years old. And in some of our regions, we also provide occupational therapy, speech language therapy, and school readiness programs. So for right now, those programs are available in Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and Virginia, although we do have lots of free resources on our website that's in those therapeutic domains that I'll talk about a little later on in our presentation. So in St. Louis, our services are provided in-home, in the community, throughout St. Louis and Southeast Illinois. And we also provide center-based services in Benton at the We Rock the Spectrum, which has been an amazing clinical partnership. So again, I'm Jess Goldberg. I am one of the outreach specialists for Early Autism Services. I'm also a proud special needs parent. And with me today is our amazing, incredible clinical services director in St. Louis, Melissa Vesser. So the purpose of this presentation today, and again, I mentioned we're going to keep things very informal. We want to try to provide a roadmap to caregivers or anyone with a touch point to a child with autism, almost an Autism 101. This is something, a presentation like this, I would have found very helpful when my son was first diagnosed with autism, because accessing resources, understanding what to do first, all of that is just so overwhelming. So based on our experiences working with families in the community and my personal experience, that's how we pulled all of this information together for you today. We hope you find it helpful. So today we're going to chat about a lot. High-level view of what is autism, common concerns parents and caregivers may have if you're concerned a child may be on the spectrum, where to start, the importance of early and intensive intervention, some common therapy options, how to identify and secure funding opportunities, how to choose a provider, community resources, accessing community resources, and then next steps, putting that all together. And of course, plenty of time for questions and answers. So autism, what is autism? Some statistics. 1 in 54 children are diagnosed with autism. It is 4 times more prevalent in boys than it is in girls. Symptoms associated with autism can be exhibited as young as 18 months of age, but typically a diagnosis can be rendered between 2 and 3 years of age. It impacts every race and every culture. There is no cure for autism, but with treatment, especially at an early age, significant improvement in deficit areas can be made. And the cause for autism is unknown. Research does suggest that it's likely a combination of genetics and different environmental factors. Characteristics associated with autism, the DSMV, the diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder, include persistent deficits in social communication and interaction, restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, interest, or activities. It's a spectrum disorder with a wide range of abilities. Some symptoms can be very mild or others severely debilitating. And it can sometimes be associated with other developmental disabilities or not. Autism is different for every individual who experiences it. So it is always important to understand that it is a spectrum disorder, meaning there is a wide range of symptoms that people with autism experience. There's a saying, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. It's different for every single person. So a person with autism may be nonverbal, or they may communicate very clearly. Some require assistance with everyday tasks, and others may live completely independent lives. There is no one single behavior that is always present with every individual with autism, and no 2 people with autism are the same. So common concerns a parent may have. Will my child be able to live a, quote, normal life? Live independently, have friends, communicate wants, needs, feelings. Every journey is unique. Like we've said, we'll continue to say autism is a spectrum disorder. So not only is every aspect of autism unique for every individual that experiences it, but it's also a very unique experience for each individual who supports that person on the spectrum. So this picture is a photo of my son and I. It was taken a few months after we learned that he was on the autism spectrum. So he was about 2.5 in this picture. He's now 16 and 6'2", so really brings me back. But and gosh, I get a little choked up even in going back to this time, because when this picture was taken, I was very aware that early intensive intervention was critical for optimizing outcomes and building skills. I knew that. I knew the facts and the data. What I was very unaware of was how incredibly overwhelming, emotionally, financially, isolating, devastating in some ways, as a parent and caregiver, it was to receive that diagnosis. My son was still the same delicious kiddo that he was right before we received it, but getting that information was so overwhelming, because there's so much unknown and charting the path is hard. The evaluation process, even getting the diagnosis, long waiting lists, it can be expensive, even with insurance. And again, we're going to talk about funding opportunities, but it's all very, very overwhelming how to access all of these resources. Processing the diagnosis emotionally, analytically, there's so many factors to consider. I didn't know what long-term prognosis meant for my son. Friends and family didn't always understand. In fact, often were quite judgmental of some of the choices my husband and I made to support my son. Play groups, story time, community, childhood rites of passage that are, that neurotypical kids enjoy naturally, weren't always accessible to my son. He would have tantrums that lasted for hours. He would pull his hair out and bite himself and smash his head on walls sometimes, to the point where, he would really hurt himself badly. And between his second and third year, it is hard for me to remember a time that he wasn't crying. Until we understood how to even attempt to see the world from my son's perspective, we couldn't begin to help him. So crafting a comprehensive treatment plan to address all of his needs and our family's needs was essential, but very difficult. So my best advice to any caregiver or professional working with someone on the spectrum is to network and collaborate. The power of networking is so essential. Connecting with a supportive network of people like this, like ParentLink, like this wonderful group we are gathered with today, is so important. To share resources, to talk with people who get it, and then let that network evolve and grow. So the big question is, how do families access the resources they need to best support their child? So where to start? Always, 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 first and foremost, your pediatrician. If you have any concerns about your kiddo, whether it is medical, developmental, always share your concerns with your pediatrician. Not every missed milestone means there's a developmental delay going on, but the more information we have, the better positioned we are to help our children grow and thrive. So if you have a concern, again, always express that concern with your pediatrician. Depending on what your pediatrician sees, they might suggest getting a developmental evaluation. So working with a diagnostician. Typically, these are developmental pediatricians, neurologists, neuropsychologists, and they can provide a comprehensive developmental evaluation. Another avenue is to go through state resources. So your early intervention program through your state. Every state provides an early intervention program. I believe in St. Louis and in Missouri is the First Steps program. So reaching out to that program and just beginning that process is, again, more insight to how to help support your child. So for children under 3, again, we're going to reach out to that early intervention program first step. For children 3 and older, often that process begins with the school system. So an evaluation might begin just to really start unpacking and understanding how to best support your child. There are amazing free national resources across the country. Autism Speaks, the Autism Society, and not only do they have great resources just, on different ways to support children and adults therapeutically, but also there's some local groups as well. And then, of course, connecting with early intervention providers like early autism services, ABA providers, speech, language, occupational therapists, physical therapists, to begin crafting that comprehensive treatment plan for your kiddo. So I would now like to introduce Melissa, who's going to share a bit about the importance of early and intensive intervention.
Hello, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Melissa Vesser, and I'm a board certified behavior analyst, or BCBA, and I'm a clinical director here in St. Louis, Missouri for early autism services. I'm going to start my portion of the discussion today talking about early intervention. Early intervention are services that are used to support young children anywhere from infants to 3 years old. There is a lot of research on the effectiveness of early intervention. The CDC states that intervention is likely to be most effective the earlier. So always the earlier, the better. Early intervention can change a child's developmental path and really improve those outcomes later in life. Many families that I know and have worked with over the years have seen really great success with early intervention services. Okay, I'm now going to talk through some common therapy options for individuals on the autism spectrum, and those therapy options may include applied behavior analysis, or ABA, speech and language therapy, or occupational therapy. Okay, we're going to start off with talking about ABA. So I get the question a lot, what is ABA? It's a really common question I get. And ABA is a science. It is in the field of psychology. It is a science that focuses on understanding human behavior and the environmental variables that impact human behavior. ABA therapy is led by a board certified behavior analyst, or a BCBA, and oftentimes there is a therapist or a registered behavior technician that is involved in the therapy process as well. Individuals providing ABA therapy are certified and credentialed, and the ultimate goal of ABA therapy is to teach and enhance socially important behaviors. Every plan, may look different. So some skills that ABA providers may be working on may include academic skills, social communication, daily living, really anything that will enhance the independence and the quality of life for the individuals that we serve. Another common question I get asked is, where is ABA provided? Some people may initially think it might be at, a doctor's office or a medical facility. But, as you see here on this slide, really, my answer is always ABA can be provided anywhere at any time. At Early Autism Services, we provide ABA where the client needs us. We may work in their home. We may work at a center. As Jess had mentioned, we partner with We Rock the Spectrum in Fenton, Missouri, and we provide therapy services within that center. Or we may work in the community. potentially in a school or a daycare setting. We also, we can really work anywhere. We may go to a grocery store, a playground, a play date. It's wherever the client and the family needs us. Or we may provide some remote services as well to support the individual. ABA goals are tailored towards the setting and the individual. Everything within ABA is completely individualized. No two programs are alike. That is because no two individuals are alike. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the principles of ABA. So, a common misconception about ABA is that it is only used to treat challenging or problematic behaviors, such as, tantrums. I get that question a lot. Is this what it's used for? That's not all that it's used for. As an ABA provider, we have a variety of goals. And as I mentioned, it's all individualized. Some of our goals may be skill development. So we may be working on increasing a skill. And sometimes we may have the need to work on behavior reduction or decreasing the skill. However, we only do that if those behaviors are impacting the individual's success in their everyday life. It's very important to note that as ABA providers, if we're working on decreasing a behavior, such as tantrums, as I mentioned, we're always working on simultaneously increasing an appropriate replacement behavior. So for example, if we're targeting a decrease of tantrum behavior, we may simultaneously work on sharing or turn taking. We focus within ABA on the why or the function behind the behavior. We run assessments, including functional behavior assessments or functional analysis, to look at the environmental variables surrounding the functions of behavior. And we create our interventions around those assessment results. We use ABA to establish and teach new skills, as I mentioned, and we also use ABA to maintain the skills that were previously learned. We focus on generalization, which means that when we teach a skill, we not only want it to maintain, but we want to see it transfer across multiple settings, people, and environments. We want to make sure it's going to be a long-lasting change. Okay, I'm now going to talk about another common therapy to address developmental delays or autism spectrum disorder, and I'm going to discuss speech and language therapy. Before I dive in, I want to point out that I am not an expertise in this area. I am a board certified behavior analyst. However, my colleagues at EAS who are speech and language pathologists have written the content that I'm going to share with you today. So speech and language therapy is led by a speech and language pathologist or an SLP. When people think of speech and language therapy, they often think the goals may be surrounding articulation or the development of speech. People often think this is a therapy to get individuals to talk or to speak. That may be one part of the therapy, but there's a lot more to know about speech and language therapy in the field. Speech and language therapy is a service that is designed to treat all types of communication disorders. The scope of practice is very large. SLPs may see patients that have suffered a stroke or traumatic brain injury. They may see individuals with cognitive disabilities, feeding or swallowing concerns. They may be targeting social skills, or they may be working with individuals on the autism spectrum. There are many reasons why someone may, get speech therapy and benefit from that. As mentioned, this is a therapy for all communication disorders. It helps with speech and language therapy helps with developing and understanding language, articulation, pitch, sound, quality, and volume, expressing wants and needs, social skills, and a lot more. There's a lot of goals that can be targeted with speech and language therapy. Regarding speech and language therapy for individuals on the autism spectrum, individuals on the spectrum may have difficulty learning and using language. The autism diagnosis generally includes delays in social emotional growth. There may be deficits in nonverbal and verbal communication. It may be difficult for individuals on the spectrum to maintain communication, so to have those social exchanges, as well as they may engage in repetitive speech or echolalia. And SLPs have a very specific expertise of meeting the child at their current level, and they often use play and modeling to provide meaningful and rewarding opportunities for the child to learn how to communicate. I'd say the biggest takeaway here is just that speech and language therapy is all encompassing, and it can be used for a wide variety of reasons, and a wide variety of goals can be targeted. Now I'm going to talk about another common therapy used for individuals on the autism spectrum, and that is occupational therapy. I would like to point out, as I did with speech therapy, that I am not an expert in this area. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, and my colleagues at EAS, who are OTs, have written the content that I'm going to review with you today. Occupational therapy, or OT, is led by a certified, typically master's level occupational therapist. And I will discuss what this therapy may look like and some skills that are targeted with occupational therapy. Occupational therapy helps to maximize a child's success in their day-to-day tasks or occupations. What people don't always know is that there are many underlying skills required for the successful completion of a daily task. So for example, let's look at a simple daily task of putting on a pair of socks. Okay, so there's many building block skills that go into this. So in order to put on a pair of socks, an individual needs to have the fine motor skills to pinch the sock and open it, the gross motor skills to sit upright while pulling the sock over the foot, the visual motor skills to place the sock on correctly, and the sensory processing skills to know when it is on the correct position on the correct foot. There's a lot of skills that are involved in a very simple task. And OT focuses on developing these building block skills to work towards an end goal. In my example, was putting on socks. OTs often work with children with autism spectrum disorder to help them access their natural environment with greater ease and increase their independence, and really just to improve the way that they participate in their everyday life and their functional routines. It can be one of the areas that the diagnostic physician is looking at, focusing on a task and tending to a task.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question, but there are many things that the diagnostic physician is looking at when making that diagnosis. In therapies that I'm describing, you're definitely focusing on working through skills such as that. So regarding occupational therapy, there are 4 common foundational skills that OTs work with: sensory processing, fine motor, gross motor, and visual motor. So I kind of went through those in my previous example. Children on the autism spectrum often present with sensory difficulties, so they may have some challenges processing their senses, so sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. It impacts them, differently in their daily routines. And all of these skills can be addressed through OT. And the earlier the process starts, the better. the more likely the child will maximize his or her independence with the early intervention. At Early Autism Services, we provide a collaborative and holistic approach, meaning that we communicate all together as a team across disciplines to provide our families the best quality treatment for each child.
So we've talked about lots of different therapeutic ways to support children with autism. I want to just chat a little bit about how to access the care, including funding. And so autism coverage, I actually I mentioned earlier, I work with groups around the country. I actually live in Atlanta. The service is available to you in Missouri and in the St. Louis area. I'm blown away by the amount of options you all have. So there is autism coverage available through the state, through the autism waiver. And typically, so again, the early intervention programs, first step, that's all state funded, as well as Medicaid funding, that autism waiver. These benefits are provided based on diagnostic need, not financial need. So sometimes there's a misconception on how to access some of the Medicaid benefits. When you're working with private insurance companies, typically they will require a referral from your primary care physician, and depending on the plan or depending on the payer, an autism diagnosis may be required to have services covered. So that's something I wanted to mention. Typically when we're talking about ABA, we're saying, interventions for kids with autism. Applied behavior analysis and all of these therapeutic interventions are really helpful for lots of skill development. It's the payers, it's the insurance companies sometimes that require certain diagnoses to cover services. So it's not that the therapies aren't applicable for lots of different lots of people who have different needs. I just kind of want to mention that that's why that's sometimes required. So sometimes there is plan specific coverage based on your plan. There may be an out-of-pocket maximum or deductibles. So it's always just good to reach out just to whomever your payer is. Choosing a provider. I think this slide is really important because not only can you find providers through your insurance companies, through your case managers, through lots of different networking, your child's doctors should also have recommendations. When I talk about networking, this is another wonderful way to really connect with providers in your community. So really using your whole network, using all of the resources available to you. So speaking to others who might be in a similar situation, reaching out to the physicians and therapists that you're already working with for suggestions for other modalities you might be looking for. These are all wonderful ways to connect with providers. Understanding how to select a provider based on your family's needs, whether you're looking for in-home services or center-based services. If your child requires multiple types of therapy, ensure that a company coordinates care often. We talked about lots of different types of therapy that are helpful, but making sure that everyone who has a touch point with your child is communicating. That's something we, at Early Autism Services, we really pride ourselves, with making sure that everyone who is on that child's care team, including caregivers, are part of that communication and part of that network. And I always like to remind everyone to trust your gut and to make sure that you feel comfortable with each provider, that no one knows your child better than you do. And you should be really comfortable talking to your provider about any questions you have. You know, we've heard since we were little, there's no stupid questions. There's no stupid questions. Never apologize for advocating for your child. Whomever is working with your child should welcome that. So putting this all together, accessing community resources. Again, just like autism is different for every individual, crafting a treatment plan and navigating resources is also very individualized. So we mentioned lots of different resources in Missouri. Another resource I wanted to mention is the Missouri Department of Mental Health provides, it's referred to as the EMAP, the East Missouri Autism Project. They will assign a caseworker and we'll see if you qualify for funding for autism related things like sensory items, adaptive equipment, therapy, and this case manager will walk you through all of that. The St. Louis ARC is also a wonderful resource. Not only do they provide funding for services, they offer funding for respite. So they'll reimburse for babysitters, babysitting in, sometimes even if that's a family member. So if someone in the family is coming in, an aunt or an uncle, to come support a child, there's funding for all of that, which I think is incredible. Of course, I've mentioned before, we're all aware of the wonderful resources that ParentLink provides. National resources, again, like Autism Speaks, the Autism Society, again, they have some wonderful wide-reaching programs across the country, but they can also be helpful with helping you connect with local programs and support groups. And then local resources. I have to put a shameless brag here, but in addition to clinical services, early autism services, we're really proud of the fact that we do provide a lot of free resources for the community. So on our website, earlyautismservices.com, you can access self-guided courses. So anything on maybe potty training, expanding communication, understanding functions of behavior. There's loads of short videos that our speech therapists and occupational therapists have provided. So that's all accessible on our website. We also have a podcast and a community resource directory. So that is going to help highlight providers of therapy, where to get your child's haircut, a dentist who may be a little more sensitive to sensory needs of children and adults with special needs. And again, that resource directory doesn't just focus on children's resources. It's people of all stages of life. And that's free to access both for if you're looking for providers, or if your organization or business, if that's your touch point to the autism community, it's free to list any programs that are in the state. So this is our contact information. Should you have any questions, I should have mentioned in the beginning of our presentation, if you're with us live, of course, feel free to put questions in the chat. But if you are watching the recording and you have any questions for us, you can email us at info@earlyautismservices.com, and one of our clinicians would be happy to clarify any questions you have about our services. So with that, I think that really concludes our presentation. If anyone has any questions or wants us to go over any of the slides in a little more detail, we'd be happy to.
Thank you so much, Jessica and Melissa. And I see here, please stand firm on your kiddo's diagnosis because you won't get the help if you don't. So yeah, I think Jess mentioned it starts with us, as a caregiver, that we are the experts when it comes to the kiddos in our care, and trust your gut. Absolutely. We are their first advocate. I had a 1 week question, but I also wanted to make a point. I think Melissa was talking about it. If anyone else has any questions, please jump in there. So I'm just, I had a thought back to, the haircuts. We just think about, unless you live in this world, you take the small things for granted, like, getting your kiddo's haircut. And I have a memory of my kiddo, who's now a young man, but the age of 3. And I remember telling his occupational therapist, we had early intervention supports early, I told his occupational therapist, I said, I literally would cut his hair in the bathtub. I used to be a hairdresser, so I got that right, but I would cut his hair in the bathtub because I would tell his occupational therapist, I said, he literally looks like he's in pain and acts like he's in pain when I'm cutting his hair and the little hairs are falling on, even if he has a towel my biggest eye-opening experience in this journey was that she told me, April, he is in pain. It's not that he's acting like he's in pain. He is in physical pain. When you look at the sensory integration needs, of your kiddo on the spectrum. And I will never forget that, and that, and in addition to hundreds of other examples and experiences, but I just wanted to mention that. So I had a question but I don't want to rob the time because I know we're at 10:57. So I can email my question, but I wanted to hand it back off to Yvette if there aren't any other questions. But thank you guys so much. This was amazing. Amazing. And please connect with me or Amy on the warm line if you guys want more information, again, for the St. Louis area. But Jess will tell you, I have hit her up on many other areas and connections for other rural communities in Missouri that these guys provide services for.